Hey everybody, it's Mike and Chris from All Things 3D. It's October 10th, 2014, and this morning it's another episode of Week in Review. We're going to talk about all kinds of stuff that happened this week in the 3D world. What do you say, Mike?
What do I say this morning? I don't have any glasses on. It's another foggy day here in Morro Bay, California. But thanks to artificial LED lighting, I am illuminated. But yes, we have a fun lineup. Plus, we have the directors from Print the Legend who are going to be our special guest crashers today about 9:45. In fact, we've got one of them who've already showed up.
All right.
Let's see, who do we have? I don't hear anything yet. So
Looks like he's joining.
Yeah. Well, that's good. Looks like Lewis. So we'll probably talk to them about 9:45. So let's head on into the news, Chris.
Yeah, so my first news item we'll talk about today is a company we've had on the show, Cyark, has joined up with Microsoft to unveil a new website. So you can head on over to cyark.org. So that's cyark.org. And you can see some of their full-scale scans that they've done over the last few years, and you can also watch their TED Talk. But they have some really neat scans of Mount Rushmore, which is, and it's pretty interesting to see it in full-scale 3D. Cyark specializes in using laser scanners to scan and preserve full-scale monuments.
Yeah, and these aren't the laser scanners you see from MakerBot or Matter and Form. These are huge LiDAR-based, and they essentially either go stand in front of the objects, or in the case of the Mount Rushmore, they literally were on what would you call it, scaffolding, as well as lines that were projected below them in order to get the scan detail. I mean, it was really gnarly. So if you go out and look at the story, it's pretty cool.
And you'll have to refresh my memory when the date was, or we'll have to go back through the podcast. We'll probably put it in our liners. We had one of the people from Cyark on our show. This has been about, I don't know, maybe
4 to 5 months ago. Yeah.
And he was telling us that he obviously had to get security clearance. Mount Rushmore is now a secure site. It's a national monument. And one of the things I thought was interesting is you can kind of see back here this interesting place called the Hall of Records, which I kind of wanted to find more out about. So I started reading about that, because there's all these. There's a lot of speculation about what goes on inside Mount
Now,
Rushmore.
if I remember correctly, when we interviewed them, that a lot of their models were just viewable, and we kind of asked, well, when are you going to make these printable? And surprisingly, what they told us that some of the people that have backed them aren't even from the United States. They're from other countries, like I think the Dutch. Which sponsored this. So
or Irish, I thought he said.
Well, maybe I think it was a combination. Irish, I think the Dutch, but they've had
which was weird to me.
Other...
They're getting government funding from a foreign government, but getting domestic security clearance to go and 3D scan places that we can't get clearance as citizens. It just didn't make any sense to me. And then they have the models that are of public domain monuments, but then won't make them public, even though they're using public funds from foreign governments of domestic national monuments. It kind of didn't make any sense to me, and the fact that we can't have the models of Mount Rushmore, even though it's semi-tax funded. It didn't really make any sense, but whatever. Okay, so on to the next.
Yeah, let's go on to the next item, and this is going to go hand in hand with our directors who are going to be coming on here shortly. If a lot of people are maybe aware of this, Bree had stepped down from the role of CEO. Some rumor that he was actually ousted, but that it's not confirmed. And a new CEO, and I thought she looked familiar, or the name sounded familiar. Her name is Jenny Lawton, and there's a picture of her Let's get past her. And if you remember, she was the woman in the background. In fact, I kind of thought of her as the puppet master. She was the one
I
actually
kind of
pulling the
thought.
strings.
Uh-huh.
And it appears that she's actually supposedly very friendly and sincere, and she's a people person and really wants to support not only the customer but her own team, which makes sense. You can't have a happy-go-lucky company if you're not back. And that was always one of the arguments I had with Steve Jobs, is that sure, he pushed great products out there, but he treated a lot of people like trash. And I mean, and this wasn't just rumors; these were confirmed either from people or other stories. And some people thought that Brie was kind of moving in that direction, and one of the reasons they say that he was kind of ousted is to get somebody in there that was more of a people person and could motivate and move the company MakerBot into striving for new excellence. And let's see if that's going to be the case. So yeah, it'll be interesting where she takes the company, and I think in a lot of cases when you have people that like the people they're working with and support the people, that really is always a positive in moving a company forward. So there she is, and her name is, as mentioned, Jenny Lawton. So good for you, and you can find this out on 3D printing, and the article is written by Brian Krassenstein. Yeah. So on to your article.
All right. Well, this one's pretty cool. This is from Harvard. If you head over to softroboticstoolkit.com, you can find some info. Harvard School of Engineering and Applied Sciences, in collaboration with some other organizations, as you can see here, if you're joining us on the Google Hangout. They have unveiled a soft robotics toolkit, which they're open sourcing, and basically they are allowing you to contribute back to the soft robotics movement, which for those of you that are not familiar with soft robotics, it's basically the same thing as regular robotics, but using soft materials. So what we're able to do now is either 3D print the molds and pour resin or rubbers, and then actuate them pneumatically or electronically. There's all kinds of different research fields using this now, as you can see in the video.
Oh, that's very cool.
Yeah,
I want to do that.
Yeah, they're using this as a heart. This is simulating a heart here. So this is
Chris, don't you have something yourself that uses this material? Do you have that arm or that hand?
Yeah, so there's also a project called Yale Open Hand. We've talked about that on the show, and I showed off that hand before. Here it is showing kind of a mixture between FDM and this soft robotics thing. So they're kind of showing off their SolidWorks. I can tell that interface from a mile away. Here he goes. He's showing it. And there's lots of case studies here on the website. So if you're interested in getting into robotics, one of these emerging fields that Harvard is putting a lot of energy into is soft robotics. And so here you'll see him pouring some resins. Yeah, so Yale has one called the Open Hand Project, and that's a mix. They're calling it SDM technology, which is solid deposition modeling. It's a mix between FDM and kind of using it as overmolding, and using 3D printing as your molding or as a mold, and then pouring these things. So this is pretty interesting stuff. I think we're going to see a lot of growth in this sector. So here they show a breadboarded. They show some. They've open sourced their whole bill of materials, where to get this stuff. So you can actually, for relatively cheap, build one of these systems. So all you need is a little pump, a breadboard, and some actuators, and maybe an Arduino. So there's a setup right there.
Very cool.
Yeah. So.
Well, thanks on that, Chris.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's move on to the next item that I've got, and that is the bad news. 3D printer stocks were down for many of the people except one, Stratasys, which is kind of ironic. But it looks like we're going to have a rebound. So if you notice, New York are 3D Systems, and I follow these stocks, and yeah, they did go on down, but they are slowly climbing back up. VoxelJet, we've had in the news before, and X1, which I've not really followed in the past. Hey, guys. So with that being the case, yeah, it has been hard for those companies. 3D Systems, I've been working with them lately with my 4eyes, and they're really trying to kind of merge their consumer, prosumer, and professional markets together. So we'll see where that takes them. And I know that we do have our two directors in the background there from Print the Legend, and maybe they can chime in. They did actually interview the CEO of 3D Systems, so maybe we'll get their take on it. But it only one that seemed to really be moving ahead, stable, or actually climbed a little bit is Stratasys. And the reasoning they say behind that is because they have one of the few color printers out there, but I think more importantly, their channels. As you know, Chris, you've got a Fortis 250 back there, and they have done a lot to move it forward. And I think for the most part, they've worked well with you, right, Chris?
Oh yeah, Stratasys for being the size of the company they are, they've got great support. They've got a pretty a really decent structure as far as like education. They own the largest service bureau in the world is Red Eye On Demand, and I hate to plug a competitor, but really they're not even really a competitor because they're just like they're so big that. But Red Eye On Demand, they're out of Minnesota, and they are the largest 3D printing service bureau in the world, doing FDM, and now, of course, they own Objet, so they do PolyJet, I believe, in-house too.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. The other thing is that we talked about it, 3D Systems, even though they might have some good technology, their support structure hasn't been on par, as you've talked about with Stratasys. In fact, you kind of warned me because I was looking at some of their color printers, and you said, oh, they might have some good technology, but their support has been really terrible. So
yeah, they're hit and miss. I have one of basically my rep for 3D Systems. I don't own a 3D Systems machine, but I'm in the kind of the area of a rep out of Portland, and he told me that it just varies very widely. The type of support you're going to get varies very widely on which machine you choose. So there's some that are great, and others that even he as a rep said, don't even touch them. So I thought that was interesting coming from a rep, and yeah. So he says there's actually some like ProJet machines that are really, really nice machines that he says are some of the nicest printers on the planet. Which yeah, 3D Systems makes great machines. I mean, they made the Viper, which if you're into stereolithography and you need high detail small parts, the Viper, which is not even they don't even manufacture the machine anymore. Is the most highly sought after SLA machine on the market. So, yeah.
Well, like you said, you have to have the support infrastructure as well, and hopefully they're moving in the right direction with that. But I know that they really pushed into the consumer market with their Cube series, and hopefully we'll have the director of that on at a later interview. So, but it's about 9:45, and we've got two guest crashers, the directors from the great documentary Print the Legend, which we were obviously interviewed a few months back, and I actually saw in the last couple of weeks on Netflix, who I guess has an exclusive viewing of it. So if you're a Netflix fan, please head out there. It's free, and you can watch it. We did, and we both enjoyed it immensely. So I'd like to introduce Clay and Lewis, and both of you, do you have voices?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear both of you. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off the ability, so we're just going to use voice activated, so you're welcome to talk. Obviously, we have a lot of questions for you because we saw it, and then obviously there's big news, and it was one of the items I made about the new CEO, which you showed in the background a lot, Jenny Lawton, and maybe you can shed a little bit of light on there. Obviously, you've been following them for years, so it'd be interesting, plus maybe your perspective of Bree not being part of the MakerBot and off on doing something else, and I'll shed some of my own viewpoints on that. So who would like to go first? Okay.
Luis, you take it. You take it.
So go ahead and introduce yourself, Louise.
Uh-oh.
Oh, he looks
Oh, we
muted, doesn't he?
lost. Yeah, we've kind of lost your audio. So.
I'll go ahead. I'm Clay,
Okay. Hi, Clay.
the other co-director. So what would you like to know there, Michael?
Well, essentially, you followed them for some time. So are you surprised that Jenny Lawton is now CEO?
Not. I mean, Jenny's very savvy. I mean, it's not totally surprising. It is a little bit, but I think for us, we actually, when we first started entering the world, and we talked to a lot of venture capitalists and entrepreneurs, startup co-founders, and it's like it seemed to us to be a pretty common type of thing that once a company grows to a certain level, that often the founders, the people who started it, are actually leave for various reasons. So they're, it's not. I can't say it's totally surprising, but Jenny's a great leader, I think, and so I'm interested to see where she is going to take MakerBot while she's in charge.
Yeah, and I kind of noticed that she seemed like, as I called it earlier, the puppet master. She seemed like the person in the background that seemed to be running things. As you mentioned in your documentary, Bray was kind of like as you kind of indicated, and he kind of self-confessed, the Steve Jobs of the print world. And I'm not a real big fan of Steve Jobs. He's done a lot, but I can't say I really like the personality, and I did see some similarities there. And what's interesting is that one of the clips that you sent me was where he goes, cut, cut, cut. Obviously, he seemed to, would be annoyed be the word for it, but he started to seem uncomfortable having that always present eye. So, and you notice this happened towards the end of the series without giving too much away. So it was alluded to, not by you, but others, that your presence of MakerBot itself was not always in the positive light, and I think it's fairly accurate. I've done a little bit of investigation of Bree, listened to some other interviews, and I feel that he has not really given the credit to where credit is due, especially to other manufacturers or software vendors. In case in point is, and we did have Autodesk on in an interview, I asked him, I said, I've noticed when Bree talks, he talks about the name of the product but never identifies the company, which I thought was a little strange. And this was ongoing in several. And so I just noticed lately he starts to tell more about the people behind things, which I think is a good direction to go.
Yeah, for us, I think we tried to, with the movie, give like a range of viewpoints about what was happening, and so hopefully as an audience member, you can see Bree's point of view, you can see his employees' point of view, you can see investors, other competitors, and kind of are able to take away from that whatever you want. But I think we tried to be as objective as we could about what it means to grow this far, this fast.
Yeah. No, and I think you did an excellent job of that by covering multi-facets of that and looking at employees that were with them still and those that weren't with them still. But I think Chris wants to talk about his favorite character. What's his name, Chris? Cody?
Oh, Cody Wilson. He's an interesting character. And yeah, so you've seen his latest, The Ghost Gunner.
Yes.
Yeah, really interesting. And so my thought, so are you guys already got Print the Legend 2 in the works?
Luis, are you there?
I just switched over to my internal mic, and I don't know if you guys can hear me. Can you
I
hear me?
can hear you great. Go ahead.
All right, so we were talking about Cody, right?
Yes.
Print the Legend 2. I don't know. What do you think? It's a great idea. It seems to be something that has no end, and it's going to keep growing, and things are going to keep evolving. And speaking of Cody, I don't think there's any stopping Cody either.
No.
Right. No.
Well, what's funny is that he was a very colorful character, and even if you don't like his politics or his opinions, he was very colorful. And my thoughts in in the documentary is, okay, I could understand why you went with Formlabs and you went with MakerBot. They're on the East Coast. Now, are both of you on the East Coast, or? Okay,
No,
so I'm
both
going
in
to.
we're
LA.
based.
Where are you at, Calais?
We're both in LA.
Okay, so you're on the West Coast. So it's kind of interesting. So obviously you spent a lot of time on the East Coast, and but then you had to go smack in the middle to Texas. So how long did you spend in Texas?
Probably we were there for a handful of days when the Liberator when he had just shot the Liberator and uploaded the file. So we spent a couple days there, and then we just kind of visited every couple months or so. We'd stop by and check in and see what was going on. But in cumulative, probably not a whole lot of time there. Maybe 3 or 4 trips, Clay.
Yeah, I think 3 really. But Cody's so articulate that he really gets to the point and can soundbite things in a way. He's very PR savvy, so
Yeah.
it made our jobs easier in that way.
Well, and he's had his hand in so many other projects. He's not only an activist on the 3D printing front, kind of pushing the envelope of like what's extra legal. He's always in the gray area there. But another place that he's popped up recently is in the crypto world for cryptocurrency. He's had his hand in a project called Dark Wallet, which is a really interesting project that kind of even further anonymizes your Bitcoin wallet or other cryptocurrency wallets theoretically. And he's been working with kind of hacktivists at developing software. And I mean, he's just pushing the envelope and kind of, I mean, in the police state world that we live in now today, what he's doing is he's kind of just, pushing the bounds to kind of show people, hey, this is where we're at, and it's very relevant what he's doing. I think, my hat's off to him.
For sure, yeah. Regardless of where you sit with his politics, something that we found interesting was how principled he was about his belief system. And there's no, regardless of where you stand politically on how those play out, in our film, at least he's a guy that principles sort of stay throughout our time with them.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that was important. And as you mentioned, they do stay aligned, and he stuck with them, even though, as in most cases, people who want the limelight kind of flex depending on what the trend is. So kudos for that, but obviously he's very controversial, and whatever your opinions are about printed guns, he has made his mark, I guess. So let's kind of move on a little bit about Formlabs themselves. I don't know if you've seen in the news lately, and actually we've been reporting it, but I went out to a particular site, and we reported it last week, CTC, I don't know if you heard of them, but they got a lot of funding from a Chinese city, and I was looking through some of the images, and it looked like an almost exact duplicate. No, it wasn't an exact duplicate, except it used red instead of amber for the casing. And then there was also a lot of MakerBot-like clones in the background as well. One of the things that I talked about in our previous interview is that you kind of limited it to those companies, which I think is important to show their rise. If you do come out with a 2, are you going to look at its more global expansion? Obviously, the Chinese are playing a big part now, regardless, good or bad. They had the manufacturing. A lot of people have been using them to provide their manufacturing. So they're starting to show up. Dremel just licensed FlashForge, which is I wouldn't say a Chinese knockoff. I think they originally started out as a Chinese knockoff, but their new Dreamer is their own design now. So we're starting to see some changes and actually some innovation in the Chinese market, the Taiwanese, the Koreans, everybody in that area. And then obviously we've got Europe. I was a little surprised personally not to see Ultimaker, which I think is also part of that fundamental movement in this area. So Europe is big in that. So I'm wondering if you do make another version, is it going to have more of an international flavor?
Well, I think that for us, we had to limit the story and to make it all kind of fit into a 90-minute film. But in doing so, we wanted to just be able to take like a little bit of a time capsule of an industry, and the industry itself what was appealing to us was that it moved so fast and everyone is growing. Yeah, we talked to Up, we talked to Ultimaker, we talked to Solidoodle, we talked to tons of people that are just like, their companies are growing just as fast as Formlabs or MakerBot. But for us, we had to kind of pick our battles and try to find what the best story would be. And so the reason that we were able to focus on these particular companies was we had one, you know, some bigger companies, Stratasys and 3D Systems, that were like huge multinational companies, and then you have MakerBot, who's kind of in the middle, and then Formlabs, who is just in the earliest stages. So we wanted to see, you know, examine an industry from a small, middle, and medium type of perspective, and hopefully that the stories and the challenges that these companies were going through would be representative of all the other companies that are, you know, in the same industry. We met so many interesting people. The guys from Ultimaker were great. We talked to them at Maker Faire in San Francisco last year a lot. So, yeah, I wish we could.
So, is there a possibility that obviously you have an exclusive with Netflix. So, if you were going to put out a DVD or a Blu-ray, like the behind the scene, those extra
what are those?
clips. I'm sorry.
I said, what are DVDs?
Yeah, okay. But, you know, a good example that, I don't know if you saw the movie Indie the Gamer. They came out with another series of actually prologue or epilogue clips the next year. So maybe something like that could be in the works. I would love to hear what you talked about with some of these other companies. I'd love to hear what's on the cutting floor that never got out there. But Chris and I are geeks, and we'd love to hear that. But I'm assuming there are other people. So if you wanted to put it out on your own website, I think there would be a lot of people that would provide you a few dollars to get some more behind the scenes. So that's my opinion.
Cool.
Chris, you got something to add to that? Or actually, I'm sorry, Louis. How about you? You have anything to add to that?
No, I was just going to put that on my to-do list. I'll just put it on the because we do have a lot of great footage and a great material, and inevitably, in taking an experience we spent a year and a half, a lot of the stuff does end up on the cutting room floor, probably 90%. And so, we would love to kind of make that accessible, some of it, because there is a lot of great material and a lot of great interviews.
Well, I'd love to see it, so please put them up there, and we'll promote it here. You know, we don't have the largest audience yet, but we're kind of avid 3D crazy guys, so we would love to move forward with it. So tell us more. So it looks like we're about finished with the 15 minutes that Corey said that you would be able to give us. So if you got anything that you want to finish this up with, and then we'll move back into the rest of our news, and we really appreciate you guys being on. So Louis, you want to go ahead and start first?
Sure. I just want to say thank you for having us, and we hope you enjoy the film and check it out on Netflix, please.
Okay, and we'll keep promoting it.
It is a great film. Anybody that hasn't seen it, you got to go out there and check it out.
Yeah. And Clay, any final words?
I'll just kind of double up on what Louise said. Thank you. You guys, talked to us back at South by Southwest, and then helping us talk about the movie now, so we really appreciate it.
Yeah, and well, it's a great movie, kept us on the edge of our seat. You know, if you're into 3D, there is really nothing out there right now that really shows the heart of it, and both of us have been involved with it, and yeah, it has its ups and downs, but I think in the long run it'll be worthwhile, and it will change civilization and society. Okay.
I agree.
Chris, you want to add to that, and then we'll move on. Thank you again, guys.
Yeah, thanks again for being on.
Of course, thank you.
Appreciate it.
So let's see. I think your next item up, or is the Autodesk item, Chris?
Yeah. So one thing that I did notice that happened this week was Autodesk, announced that all of their software is they have free versions now. So and there's no catch. Just select your free software here, and pretty much everything. It's free for students, educators, or certain institutions.
But the catch is you have to have a student ID and you have
Sure.
to be enrolled, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Just to let you know, in the past, their software was available for $100 for, I think, 3 years, as long as you were enrolled as a student. And this can be both in a university or into a, I want to say college, but what's the word I'm looking for? Any 2-year programs out there, state
Associates
college.
programmer.
Yeah. So yeah, I think kudos to them. I was involved with it early on when I was going through school, and I think it's great. I think it's a great motivator for people who are looking to get into it, and more importantly, at Autodesk, it starts to create followers. And Chris, you being a SolidWorks person, we're just hoping. What's funny is they have something similar to that, but they watermark their material. And then you cannot use your designs in the working version. At least that's what I read. So yeah, I hope that they move forward with something like a light version, because I would love to use some of those tools. It's just a little bit out of my price range.
Yeah, I think it's out of a lot of people's price range, but I think price sensitivity on the part of the consumer, that's part of the demand part of the market, and it will naturally drive the product's price down, or the pricing structure. You just look at the example set by Adobe, for instance. I mean, they're doing market research constantly. They have whole teams dedicated to pricing their products, and so they probably put. I mean, you can guarantee that Adobe put a lot of time into market research before they decided, oh, we're going to do a monthly subscription service, and we're going to just include every piece of software ever that Adobe's made on the Creative Cloud. So, if they're doing it, it's only a matter of time before people like SolidWorks and Autodesk are doing it as well.
Let's hope so. So moving on to my final news item, the Strati. We've talked about this in the past, and oops, I was already on it. Sorry about that. There we go. The Strati. So it looks like, what's his name? I knew what it was before. Lance Ulanoff from Mashables actually had an opportunity to ride in this vehicle. That's him on the left, and I'll play the video in the background here by Mashable. So they've actually had an opportunity to ride it. They talk about some of the specs on this thing, like the maximum speed is like 50 miles an hour. But look at the extrusion lines on this thing.
Yeah, I mean, they probably printed it at like 1 millimeter. It looks like 1 millimeter. I mean, there's no need to print it at 0.3 millimeter or 0.2 millimeter.
Well, it wouldn't make any sense. It would take, but it says it took 2 days and 49 parts to build.
That's
but it looks like the seats there weren't 3D printed. Looks like maybe the dash is not 3D printed. The steering wheel is so obviously there's a combination of a printed frame chassis, if I remember correctly, but some of those parts do look like they're off the shelf. Actually, Lance is driving it. Now, if I remember correctly, this car is electric, yes?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And so 50 miles an hour, I want one of those. Imagine being able to print that. Do you remember what printer they used?
I do not know.
So it does say it uses carbon fiber reinforced thermoplastics. So we've kind of talked about that being kind of the holy grail, and I would assume that would have to be the case here. But they said 50 miles per hour, and the early models were only going 25. It doesn't tell me what my MPG is, or what they call it, EMPG, the number on a charge. So I would expect it probably not to be that many. But obviously, it's a good showcase of what you could do with 3D printing. I don't know if I would attempt that with my own, but yeah, it's kind of fun, and kind of ends on a fun note. So on to Mike's rant. Mike has not enough time. But who does?
We heard all about it. If you want to hear Mike rant, you can hear a really good one earlier this week.
Yeah, last week as well, but I don't really, just not enough time. And we already talked about Clay and Lewis and projects of the week. Ducati Girl is out. We interviewed Val Crow, also aka Jackie Wan, yesterday. who the Ducati Girl was made for. So it went out yesterday. It's on its way to Canada, and hopefully it will be a perfect fit. And he'll be able to show it off at the Toronto Makers Maker Fair, I think in November 10th, if I remember correctly. So it'll be fun. Hopefully it will all fit together and it'll be glorified in bathing light. And then the final evaluation of my teeth. Yeah, I don't know if you can see this, but right there is the filling. It's a clear material. I originally did it in fire cast material, but I found that it did swell a little bit, but I casted it in Formlabs clear. It's still a little thick, but it does seem to conform to the shape of the cavity. But in the future, as I do with other parts, you have to reduce the parts between them. In this case, since I couldn't reduce the tooth, I would have to reduce the filling in order to create a perfect fit. But you don't want to do it too much, as I was told by the dentist, Dan Kopp, because then it would allow bacteria to get into it. So one of the reasons they just use kind of a UV paste and actually fill them that way instead of going through this trouble. However, this is an actual milled piece that most dental labs use. So the experiment did work. It would require some refinement, but the big problem is it takes a lot longer than their little milling machine, which can do it in 2 to 3 hours at the most, where it would take hours to print and burn it out. So I don't really recommend that. However, it's progression, and it's a lot cheaper as far as printing. And then follow up, I had an email from itSeez today about my 4-eyes lens system. They say there really wasn't much of an improvement, so I have some questions for them. They've sent me some scans. First, the big plus of the 4-eyes is that it gives you a more precise or a higher definition mesh, which means you have more faces or polygons or vertices, where they kind of, I think, artificially limit it to 50,000. Well, with that being the case, it kind of nulls what my lens system can do. But I've also noticed that the RGB lens, the one that goes over the iPad, also improves it at a specific distance. So if you're like 3 or 4 feet from the object, you're not going to see a difference. But if you're about anywhere between 350 to 400 millimeters, like a close-up shot, you will see it. And I've got this image here that I can show you that I took that kind of shows that off. This is a model that I have on Sketchfab. So if you go out to Sketchfab at ME Balzer, you'll see my site. But one of the things that if you look into the eye, notice the crispness. Now there's some deformity in the mesh. One of the things that I was hoping we could work on. But more importantly, see the definition in my beard there. That you cannot do with the standard lens system on the iPad, because even though they rate it to be able to move into that distance, it doesn't seem to do it well, and my lens really causes some pop. But again, you have to stay within 350 to 400 millimeters. Millimeters, sorry, not liters. I have beer on the mind, I guess. Okay, so that's my
It is
item.
Friday.
So what is your project that you've been working on? I noticed you didn't have one listed, Chris.
I have a product that I...
Okay, well, take your product first, and then I've got a couple I want to talk about.
Yeah, so the one that I really liked from this week was at the Maker Faire Rome reported, and this is called the Progetti. No, this is from piulab.it. It's Italiano, and it's an LDM, open source LDM, which is a low temperature deposition modeling. Is for those of you that don't know what LDM stands for. You've probably seen some LDM printers on YouTube, and now it's accessible even for those of you that build your own 3D printers, or you have an open source design. They have an open source LDM syringe kit that you can build, and here you can see some pictures and flip through, and here's like this is a syringe plunger that will actually plunge material and cool it, so you can print in clay or ceramic or I don't know what these are, but
So this attaches to any 3D printer, or?
yeah, or, I mean, you obviously will need to modify your 3D printer to accept this plunger, but it'll basically, here's just a standard NEMA 17 motor with a gear that essentially plunges this plunger down and feeds whatever material you want and then dries it. And obviously it's still experimental, but I thought it was a pretty interesting project nonetheless.
Yes, very, very cool. I'll have to look into that. See
Yeah,
what I can
so
do.
so if for those of you that want to know more about it, you can go over to piulab.it. So it's piulab.it.
Okay, and it will be in the show notes. Well, great. Well, thanks. So I've got actually two products. One is more of a rebuttal. It looks like Tom's Hardware. So if you've been into computers, they've always done a lot of reviews on computer hardware, motherboards, video cards. But now it looks like they're kind of pushing into 3D printing now. So I have my opinions on it. I'll have to look at some of their other reviews. But they really liked the Formlabs Form 1 Plus, and I would have to agree with them. However, I would agree with their pros, but then they talk about their cons of it being an expensive printer. Relative to what? The other SLA printers out there are about $1,000, but normally they don't have the build side nor the support process behind it. And then to indicate that the resins are expensive, yeah, resins are expensive, but there are other manufacturers besides Formlabs that you can get resins from. We've had both of them on MakerJuice and Made Solid, and then there's another company, and I apologize for not remembering their name. So there are other sources, and it's about half the price. So I don't really know if that's a huge barrier in moving into SLA. The prices are coming down, and there are other people to provide resins for it. So is $32.99 a lot to spend for a printer? Well, it has a large volume, and anybody else who's creating something like that of this build size are either equivalent in price or a little bit less, but unknown as far as support. They've been at it for about 2 years now. So I would recommend it, and as again, they gave it a 4-star. I don't necessarily agree with their cons, but yeah, I'd appreciate it. And as indicated, you can go down to 25 microns, but keep in mind it's about 4 times slower. So the problem with laser-based SLA is that if you increase the resolution, you decrease or increase the time as well, and sometimes significantly. Sometimes just sticking with 100 microns is enough to, and that actually is not 0.001 inch. That's actually 0.001 millimeter. So that would be the direction to go, and you can still get smooth surfaces just the way SLA is. So that's what I would recommend. And then my other product, and I'll move right on to it, is Adobe has another upgrade, and they're continuing to improve the 3D end of it. And also they are supporting Windows Touch and use with the Microsoft Surface Pro. I don't know if you've heard of that computer, but it's really cool. It's a 12-inch tablet/laptop, so they are supporting that. They can read Collada, which is kind of the open source 3D format, and they're just continuing to move. And also they're now supporting 3D PDF. And for a while there, I was wondering, well, how can I support that? I don't know if you've used 3D PDF, but it's just like PDFs, but now you can export an actual volume. As long as they have the viewer, they can rotate just like Sketchfab, but with a little bit higher detail. So I think that's going to be a kind of a cool feature. And then you have some more features, and one thing that they're showing MacTime, they're also supporting the Windows 8 printer driver, which I think they were starting to move forward with. So as you're aware of, Microsoft is now supporting it for a limited number of printers, but you can get their SDK and support if you're going to be using the Windows platform. And with Windows 10 just around the corner, and I've been working with the latest version, and it's very much like the previous version, except you now actually have a start button. So if you're a Windows 7 person, you have your start button back. So other than that, you get all the advantages, and it seems to be fairly stable, and the preview is free from Microsoft. So that's Adobe. Adobe obviously is moving forward with their end of it, and we did have an interview with one of their evangelists months ago, and it looks like they're still moving forward with it. And you can head out to Adobe and find out more information. And they too are offering free software for the educational system. So keep that in mind too. So they're moving in the same direction as Autodesk. Plus, they have a very reasonable price for their Photoshop. I think it was like $19.95 includes per month the Photoshop as well as Lightroom. It's a bundle, so you get their version. Or you can go $39.95 per month and get their full-blown suite of applications, which includes all their software. So something to keep in mind of. Thank you, Richard Curtis, for your blog entry. So back to you, Chris.
All right. Well, I have a article here, just one more article to share. And this has to do, this is from 3ders.org, and it's a few ways to strengthen 3D printed parts. And so it goes into talking about just how to make your 3D printed FDM parts a little bit stronger, or in some cases a lot stronger. So one thing is obviously to thicken your model, scale it up, add fillets. Hard edges are never a good thing, and you should try to avoid them if possible. So fillets are a great solution. Most of the 3D CAD software out there makes it easy to add fillets anywhere there's a hard edge. It also has to do with print orientation. This article is pretty great and pretty thorough. So for those of you that want to check it out, head over to 3ders.org and look for an article called How to Strengthen, or a few ways to strengthen 3D printed parts, and that of course will be in our show notes.
Well, great. I appreciate that, Chris. And yeah, I saw that there, and I just wanted to get your opinion on it. So you think it's a fairly decent little article. I noticed they bring up other techniques like casting and molding. So, and I know that, did you ever get your centrifugal, what was that thing that they showed at the end there, casting device that uses centrifugal force in order to move the material to the outside of the mold? Did you ever get that in?
Yes, I did. The Rotocast.
Rotocast, yeah.
Rotomake is the one that I went with from Kickstarter, and yep, I have it. I just need there's some parts that I still need to order up, and then I just need to piece it together and start casting parts.
Hey, so maybe you can bring that up as one of your products or your project in the next coming weeks.
Coming soon.
Well, thank you, Mr. Print Whisperer. So one other thing, and I'm not going to go through much on this, but you know, we talked about Umagine in the past, and you know, they're your alternative to Thingiverse. And one of the things that's nice about Umagine is that you own the rights to this. And if you've ever read the legalese behind Thingiverse, you don't necessarily have all the rights to your product. In fact, they give them the right to use it however they want. In fact, some of the things that have been on Thingiverse have been included in their MakerBot with no either recognition or monetary sharing of the profits per se. That is not the case with Ultimaker's Umagine, and it's growing. So if you want to go out there, you know, you can head out here, and it's very easy to sign up for. I'm already signed in here. But to add a design, you click on the Add Design, you identify what you want, identify a description, and pretty much save and continue. And then you just import it. So it's really easy to work with. I won't go through too much. You should be able to figure it out with no problem. But join up. Help support them. They're doing a good job of providing open source functionality to the industry of personal 3D printing. So we like them, and we like Ultimaker. So our little plug for them. And then on plugs, I'd like to give a sponsor shout out to Maker and Form. They provided me a actual scanner, and I just wanted to say I've been playing with it lately, and you know, I'm impressed. What you get for $600 is very durable and reliable. I've mentioned on a previous podcast. It is a little slow compared to the Next Engine, but like many things, the Next Engine will set you back about $5,000. This will set you back $600, and it will scan objects. Again, it's a tabletop type scanner, so you're limited in size, but it does work. So if you need something with some high resolution and capture RGB, it's one of the few that do, or color, excuse me. Look at Matter and Form, and they're out of Canada, and I will provide a link in the show notes for you. We also have 2 podcasts in the can. We have obviously the interview with Velcro we talked about earlier, plus we have our Roundtable podcast that we did on Wednesday, and we had several guests. Do you remember the names of them, Chris? Who did we have? Brad Hill. They created
Brad,
a little RP.
We had Steve.
Steven Hernandez
from Creation Workshop and Vision Labs. And
we had Phil from Occipital.
That's right.
Who provided a lot of information. I really appreciate him being on. And who else did we have? We had one other person.
No, I think it was those 3 and you and I.
Okay, full house. So yeah, it was a very engrossing. I thought we had one more, but maybe I've forgotten. Old age. We had one more. It was engrossing conversation, and I personally enjoyed it. We did it down in my green room, so if you take a look at it, you'll wonder why. Hopefully in the future we're going to replace that green with some exotic backgrounds in the future, but currently it's green, and we'll move forward with that. But yeah, I had my buddy right next to me, and it's a lively conversation, so please check those 2 out. They will be up as audio, and currently they're out on YouTube right now. I will be adding all the proper show notes over the weekend. But you can catch those as well as this one. Geez. And one more item. Upcoming events. It was started yesterday. I hope it's still going on. But Shaping of the Future with Polymers for 3D Printing in the Netherlands. For some reason, the Netherlands seemed, obviously that's where Ultimaker is from, but they seem to be kind of the center of 3D printing in Europe. And obviously we've seen some things from Italy and England as well, but a lot of news obviously because Ultimaker is there. But it'll be interesting. Obviously I can't make it, but I'll be reporting on it next week. And that's it. It's your turn, Chris. Sign us off, please.
All right. Thanks again to our special guest today that joined us from the great movie Print the Legend. So don't forget to go check that out. And today has been All Things 3D, a week in review on October 10th, 2014, and we will see you next week.
Bye.